Hello and welcome to the Friday, February 25th, 2022 pre-Mardi Gras edition of On Iowa Politics. Support provided by New Pioneer Co-op, celebrating 50 years as Eastern Iowa's source for locally and responsibly sourced groceries with stores in Iowa City, Coralville, and Cedar Rapids, and online through Co-op Cart at newpi.coop. Hi, I'm James Lynch of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. And with me today are Tom Barton of the Quad City Times. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, James.
Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning.
Doubling up there from the Quad Cities. Jared McNett of the Sioux Journal. Good morning, Jared.
Good morning.
Amie Rivers of the Waterloo-Cedar Courier. Good morning, Amie.
Good morning, James.
This week, Governor Kim Reynolds on the big stage and a Republican supermajority. First up, Governor Reynolds on the big stage. Following in the bread bags of Senator Joni Ernst, Governor Kim Reynolds will be delivering the Republican response after President Joe Biden's State of the Union next month. That's got to be burning former Governor Terry Branstad's butt that he never got the opportunity during his more than 2 decades in the governor's office. Amie, why Reynolds? Is she the face of the Republican Party, female, mother, grandmother, tax cutter, Trump endorser? And hopefully a Trump endorsee, she says, and
Yeah.
and she's right on the culture wars.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, she's basically embodied sort of the Republican ideal. So yes, right away during COVID, there was a lockdown in Iowa, but she was one of the first governors to quickly release everyone. So basically, that's sort of the Republican line. Like, we need to be free of COVID mandates. And Governor Reynolds has consistently done that. I think House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who said she handled COVID by choosing freedom over lockdowns and personal responsibility over mandates. That's a big issue for them. The other thing is, she's continuing that by banning mandates in schools. And I know that the legislature was even trying to do abandon private businesses at one point. So I think just that sort of let COVID be is very much a Republican line. So I think that's sort of a reward for that sort of thing going forward. The other thing, she's a female governor. They like, highlighting that within the party. She's favored to win re-election, so she's a winner. She's not out of favor with Trump, which is a big deal, and obviously hopes to get his endorsement. So yeah, this is pretty much a solid pick for the Republicans.
It's interesting, too, that she feels vindicated in the way she has managed the state's response to COVID, and that this idea that we have to learn to live with it. Now she's pointing to, Democratic governors who basically are following the same pattern that she did much earlier, opening things up, lifting mask requirements, those sorts of things. And so she feels vindicated by that. And she just was, she was an early, a pioneer in, ignoring COVID.
Right. She was among the first Republican governors, to lift those mandates. And when you look at statistics from states that did and states that didn't, we're still getting those statistics out. But overall, Iowa didn't meaningfully suffer relative to other states that kept mandates. So that's what you can point to if you're a Reynolds supporter or if you're a Republican. States without mandates didn't fare any worse generally than states with mandates. Now, whether overall you can make an argument that sickness was perhaps more rampant, hospitalizations could have been fewer, that sort of thing. But at this stage, it's still very much ideological.
Yeah. Definitely. So Amie, is this response to the State of the Union address, is this an audition on a national stage? There's been a lot of scuttlebutt about, Kim Reynolds being considered as a possible vice presidential candidate in 2024. So is this her chance to, jump into the big league?
It very well could be, and she's been lifting her profile. She's with the Republican governors, and sort of putting herself out there on the different news shows as well. Sort of like an Ernst was when Ernst gave the State of the Union and talked about, as he said, the bread bags So sure, absolutely. If she nails this speech, she could be talked about as a possible contender.
And I mean, that's what everybody aspires to, is to be vice president, right?
Ask Biden.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. At the same time, we're seeing Mike Pompeo is visiting Iowa. Marsha Blackburn is visiting Iowa. I don't know if these folks are thinking, have bigger plans for, Pompeo certainly has been mentioned as a presidential candidate. Blackburn, I'm not sure if people look at her as a presidential candidate, but, the list of possible Republicans who would run for president in 2024 is pretty long. And anybody on that list could probably be put on the list of possible vice presidential candidates, and then that list gets even longer when you add in people, like governors and folks like Kim Reynolds. So she's got this opportunity. Tom, what should she say if you're writing her speech? What are you going to highlight? Do you attack Joe Biden, or do you talk about your record?
I think it's going to be a bit of both. I think Reynolds is going to use her record to attack Biden, as Amie mentioned, focusing largely on what Republicans will argue have been a heavy-handed approach by the Biden administration to the way that it has handled the COVID-19 pandemic, with mask and vaccine mandates that have been shunned and challenged by Republicans, including Reynolds. So again, she'll use this primetime address to talk about how permissive coronavirus policies in Iowa have helped Iowa families and businesses by keeping kids in schools and businesses open. And as Amie talked about, choosing freedom over lockdowns and personal responsibility over mandates, and how that has led to real economic recovery from the pandemic. As Amie mentioned, Iowa was one of few states that didn't issue a stay-at-home order at the beginning of the pandemic, and Reynolds didn't implement statewide mask mandates in Iowa until, I think, November of 2020, and then lifted them along with many other restrictions last February, and then earlier this month, ended the state's coronavirus public health emergency, a move that would limit the release of state public health data, and kind of, again, reflects her long-held belief that, as Amie mentioned, it's time to move on from pandemic restrictions. And so, we're also likely to see Reynolds make the case that Biden's policy initiatives and multi-trillion-dollar legislative agenda is making inflation worse by flooding the economy with government spending and making it costly for Americans, while Republicans in Iowa passed a major income tax cut. Reynolds yesterday said that Iowans will reinvest those dollars in our economy, communities will prosper, and families will rest a little easier. And that, once again, we're putting faith in Iowans and they won't let us down. She's probably likely to tout the state's fiscal management with a $1.2 billion with a $1.2 billion surplus on top of full cash reserves, and contrast that to Biden's stalled $1.7 trillion climate and social spending bill. Again, noting Iowa was able to overcome the financial challenges caused by the global pandemic and still invest in education, workforce, healthcare, while providing needed tax relief to Iowa families. And then Reynolds will also probably criticize Biden over border security. The joint statement that was put out by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Republican Leader McCarthy, credited Reynolds for sending Iowa patrol officers to the U.S.-Mexico border to assist with immigration enforcement. But again, you kind of would expect the general theme for Reynolds to be that Republican governors across America are, leading the charge in defending liberty, securing, economic prosperity, and that the Biden administration is governing from the far left, ignoring problems of working class Americans while pushing an agenda that, she said in a statement, stifles free speech, free thought, and economic freedom, and that the American people have had enough, but there's an alternative. And that's what she said she looks forward to sharing on Tuesday.
Foreign policy is foreign to governors for the most part. So how does the Russian invasion of Ukraine affect or alter Reynolds' approach here? The U.S. isn't technically at war, but it's certainly on people's minds. Does that change her tone? Less attack, more unity?
I mean, just given what we've seen from Republicans up to this point, in just kind of the general tone and tenor of our political discourse, I don't expect a unifying message from Reynolds and Republicans. And I guess I don't know how much Reynolds is going to weigh into the foreign policy arena because, as you mentioned, that's not necessarily the purview or arena that governors are familiar with. I could potentially see, Reynolds maybe making an argument that the Biden administration hasn't been forceful enough, in trying to deter Russian aggression and protect NATO allies, and that more potentially could have been done by the administration to try and halt that Russian aggression and invasion in advance, and that somehow the Biden administration maybe should have been a little bit more forceful in the way that it responded. But I don't know how much that's going to really play into our message. I anticipate more that it's going to be focused on domestic issues and how Iowa is leading the way.
I have to wonder with all of that too, especially with the Russia stuff, how much that even gets brought up, because there doesn't seem to be a unified message from Republicans about what even they should be saying as it relates to this, to the point where, like, even in the state legislature, you have somebody like, Jeff Shipley in Fairfield kind of saying that what Putin is doing is sensible, at least as it relates to NATO. So there's not the most unified messaging from Republicans as it relates to this.
And Democrats, too, for that matter. I mean, if you look at what Franken has been saying on Twitter, he's very, war hawkish. And you'll find a lot of deviation right now. I think definitely the parties are trying to figure out what a good message is right now for that issue.
I would expect that the governor would talk about the Ukrainian people and support for them without necessarily wading into foreign affairs and the policy. But I mean, everybody, wants to support the Ukrainian people. And that's a very safe approach, to express support for them. With all this going on, it makes me wonder if, doesn't this seem like a good time for China to reassert control over Taiwan? While everybody's focused on Russia and Ukraine, and it's like, oh yeah, and by the way, it's all one big China now. Anyway, so yeah, Sarah, does the governor make this speech about herself, or is it more? I guess in a way, as Tom was suggesting, that the Iowa way is a sort of a blueprint for the nation. The approach that she's leading here in Iowa should be a blueprint for federal government.
Yeah, and I think, like Amie and Tom said, I think that Governor Kim Reynolds really has an opportunity to introduce herself to the nation. So I remember when she gave her State of the Union, or State of the Condition of the State address, when she was first elected, and she introduced herself as somebody who was a working mom who worked at Hy-Vee, and so she can really introduce herself having that working class background, as well as having those common sense policies, as she characterizes it, in Iowa during the pandemic. So this is definitely an opportunity for her to continue that message that she's been talking about on national news, and show how Iowa, in her opinion, has kept schools. She's talked a lot about how she's kept schools open during the pandemic, and kids being in schools, and playing into those divisions on the pandemic. So, and also with Ukraine, I thought one thing that I found interesting was that Ukraine is a big producer of wheat. So when you talked about, like, her drawing parallels with the Ukrainian people, Iowa's a major agricultural state. So, drawing those parallels between the Ukrainian people, but would be an easy way for her to tie that in, but not get too over her head with foreign policy, especially as the Republicans don't really have that unified response to the invasion of Ukraine, like you all have stated eloquently.
Mm-hmm. And Jared, we'll come back to you with, do you think the Reynolds will do as Iowa Democrats have suggested that she will thank President Biden for the billions of dollars of federal assistance in response to COVID, or is she more likely to thank him for inflation, higher food prices, higher gasoline prices?
The thank you card for the federal money is going to be coming in the mail any day now. Biden just needs to keep going to the mailbox at the White House and checking, and it'll come any day, and all will be well on that front. I kind of had to chuckle when I covered an event that Reynolds was at in our area in January. She went to Sioux Center to tout the Lewis and Clark regional water system, which is still kind of in progress. And part of that has been funded with money from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that Biden signed last year. And only 2 of the 6 members of Iowa's congressional delegation, Grassley and then Axney, voted for that plan. But of course, in Reynolds' speech, that got glossed over completely at the time. And, you would have just assumed everyone voted for this and we all support this and isn't this great? As far as what she'll talk about, I do kind of expect there will be plenty of talk about the kitchen table type stuff people are really feeling right now. And then just attributing all of those like bad feelings to Biden because, that's just the nature of that part of the game. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I'm going to kind of be curious to see is just where Reynolds goes from here. We were talking about aspirations earlier, but in the past, some of the people that have delivered the rebuttal to the State of the Union haven't really achieved a lot afterward. Joe Kennedy III gave one of these, and he's not even in office anymore. Same goes for Mitch Daniels and Paul Ryan. They responded when Obama was in office. They're not around. Rubio gave one and is obviously still around, but kind of flamed out in 2016 in the presidential primaries. So the response to the State of the Union doesn't always guarantee your name, like in the golden book of in politics. So,
and it might make it worse. It sounds like. Oh,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, in Rubio's case, maybe enough time has passed that he's overcome his thirst. Yeah.
For politics.
Yeah. And I mean, as we speculate on this, I guess one thing to keep in mind is maybe the GOP has chosen Reynolds to deliver its message rather than her message. So she may not really have that much control over what she says in the speech. But either way, Lynn County Republicans already are planning a watch party for the State of the Union response with Governor Reynolds. So, and she'll be up against who's it, Congresswoman Presley, who's delivering sort of the progressive caucus response to their own party's president.
Oh,
so,
you
can have a response to the response. And just keep going from there.
Just keep going.
Just make it a Twitter thread.
Yeah. And next week, come back next week when we have a response from maybe the Freedom Caucus will have a response. And I'm sure we'll hear from former President Donald Trump, his ringing endorsement of the State of the Union. But moving on, it's not unusual that in the first election cycle following redistricting, we see a large turnover in the Iowa legislature. 2022 will be no exception. By my count, at least 35 incumbents have announced they are retiring or running for another office. House members running for Senate seats or vice versa, or running for a county or federal office. And that's just shy of 25% of the legislature. Chaz Nuttycombe of C-Analysis, who bills himself as the nation's leading state legislative election prognosticator. I'm not sure how much competition there is for that title.
Go ahead and take it.
Yeah, claim it.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. Anyway, Chaz is suggesting that Iowa Republicans will come away from the 2022 election with a supermajority in the House, where they already have a 60-40 advantage over Democrats. His prediction is 65 GOP seats, which to me is short of a supermajority. I I would think you need at least 67 seats for a supermajority. But anyway, he says 65 GOP seats, 33 Democratic seats, and a couple of toss-ups. One of those toss-up districts would be the area that Representative Todd Pritchard represents in north central Iowa, and the other is Representative Steve Hansen's Woodbury County district. Jared, you're probably more familiar with both of those districts from your work at the Mason City Globe Gazette and now at the Sioux City Journal. Is Nuttycombe right to call those toss-ups?
Calling the one for Pritchard's seat a potential toss-up feels reasonable somewhat if you're just going off of 2020. I think I hedged myself enough there. That time around, he beat Craig Clark by about 7 points, which is a number that you could build on if you got the right candidate. But in the years before that, Pritchard was well-liked enough that he didn't even have people running against him in the general. That was the case in 2018. And then in 2016, he was closer to winning by double digits. And then in 2014, he also didn't have a challenger. So, you can call it maybe a toss-up just because of all this redistricting and everything like that. But the past history is a little mixed on that one. And then as far as Hansen goes, I'm maybe even a little less convinced about how much that would be a toss-up. He's run and won plenty of races in the Iowa House and in the Iowa Senate before. And in 2020, he won by 11% against Bob Henderson, who is a name around here and does have clout locally. So I would think that even with, just radically different boundaries, 11% is a pretty strong firewall to have. So that one I'm a little more dubious about being a toss-up than I am the Pritchard's one, although I don't know if either of them are, 50-50 type races.
I know in 2020, Republicans thought they were going to knock off Pritchard then. And I mean, they point to all the, you look at rural Iowa and it's very Republican in terms of their legislators. And Pritchard is pretty much the only rural Democrat in the House. There may be one other, but yeah, he's the outlier. Talking about Steve Hansen, he voted for this historic, largest in history tax cut bill. What's the story there?
Yeah, that was one thing I was kind of thinking about, and some of the formulating with stuff with him is that he's cast some bipartisan votes on stuff, and they're ones that I don't think would lose him any votes with Democrats because they're not necessarily the most controversial of issues, even though people love to argue about them. And it's the kind of votes that you could maybe pick up, an agnostic voter or two who likes to pride themselves on being independent or whatever it is voters say, as far as that goes. So I could see some of that sort of, those bipartisan tendencies maybe helping too in making the race a little easier for him.
Mm-hmm. Back in 2020 cycle, Nuttycombe called the Iowa House one of the most competitive chambers and said Democrats were slight favorites to flip the House. Instead, they lost seats. He was right that Democrats flipped the last Republican seat in Lynn County, which was Ashley Hinson's Iowa House seat, and flipped a few of the rural, and Republicans flipped seat held by Democrat Bruce Behringer. And he also predicted Democrats would almost certainly have a net gain in the Senate, remain split 32-18. There was no change. With a buildup like that, I'm starting to ask myself why we're talking about his predictions at all. But never mind.
Scrap that.
When we look at the people who are leaving the House and Senate, it seems to me like most of these people or most of these districts are safe for the incumbent party. Mary Masher in Iowa City, I don't think Republicans are going to flip that seat. Those sorts of things. Amie, when you look at the Cedar Valley area, are any of those seats likely to flip, or
I'm interested in Iowa House District 76, actually, because this one was Dave Williams' seat, and the district has shifted. So it used to be pretty much majority Cedar Falls, and then just a little bit underneath it to the south. And now it's just kind of a sliver of Cedar Falls, and then a whole lot of rural to the south. And those rural counties have a bigger Republican voter share. Now, do those specific precincts have a big Republican voter share or not? I don't know. But I think that's really one that you got to watch. So you've got Kate White on the Democratic side. She's a Hudson City Council person. And then you've got Tony Chavez on the Republican side, who have so far declared. And he's a young Republican. He's 26 years old. So he's a young up-and-comer. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. But I would say the rest of them around here are pretty safe.
Jared, the same question to you as far as any openings in the Western Iowa area, Sioux City and around there.
Yeah, I think I'll be interested just to see what happens with the race for Chris Hall's seat, since he's obviously retiring. And then another one I actually will be interested to see. I don't necessarily know how close it'll be. I'll also be interested to see what happens with the race for Amanda Reagan's seat. It's not quite the same boundaries as the House area for around Mason City, but I remember in 2020 for the House race for the Mason City area, which Sharon Steckman won, the guy that ran against her got 35% of the vote, which obviously doesn't sound like much and is a pretty big blowout, but he had like no name recognition and nobody really knew who he was, and he still was able to get at least 35% of the vote. So that's another one for in that area. If the Republicans find the right person to run, that could be something that's more competitive than it has been in the past too.
Mm-hmm. And Tom and Sarah, in the Quad Cities area, are there seats in play?
Yeah, so I think State Senator Jim Lycum, Democrat from Davenport, I think his seat is probably in play. So Lycum announced that he is retiring and won't seek re-election after redistricting caused his district to shift quite a bit. It's become more rural. Lycum for years, represented a large part of Davenport. Now, with that newly drawn district, there's only a part of kind of northern Davenport that's included in that, and the rest of it becomes largely rural. It includes, I'm trying to remember now. So the district now includes Cedar, North Muscatine, and West Scott County, and again, just including kind of a portion of Davenport. And so Lycum, in announcing his retirement, mentions that, it's going to become more difficult for a Democrat running for that seat. It's likely to be a competitive race. We've got 3 candidates, I believe, running right now for that. 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, but the kind of conventional thinking there is that this will be a district or a seat that would kind of favor Republicans.
Ross Poshton's seat, is that in play?
I don't think Poshton's seat is in play because Bobby Kaufman got drawn into into that district. So so Bobby Kaufman, Republican from Walcott, he announced he's running for that newly drawn House District 82. Again, he was drawn into the new district with Poshton, and then when that happened, Poshton announced that he decided to retire and won't run for re-election. So I don't necessarily see that in play. I see that as a safe seat for Kaufman.
Any sense? I don't know how much attention you guys pay to Clinton, Mary Wolf's seat over there. She's held that for a while.
Yeah, to be honest, haven't paid much attention to Clinton in that seat, so I don't really know about that one.
Okay. Hey, and Jared, while I'm thinking about any news on Chris Hall, what his plans are, other than he's not running for re-election?
TBD still. Okay. From last week into this week. So
okay, all right, yeah, a lot of curiosity about what he's going to do. He was a bricklayer or something, wasn't he? Before running for the legislature, a mason. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, we'll get a final accounting of how many vacancies there will be when the filing period for the legislature closes, March 18th. And we'll talk about that on a future edition of On Iowa Politics. But that's it for today. If you enjoy the podcast, tell your friends and subscribe to us wherever you find your podcast. Stay up to date on the Iowa Legislature by subscribing to the Capitol Digest newsletter under the Iowa Legislature tab at thegazette.com. Any fan mail may be sent to podcast@thegazette.com. And don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier, Sioux City Journal, Mason City Globe Gazette, Muscatine Journal, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Dead Larry will take us out. If you know an Iowa band or musician who should be on our show, send us a sound file and subscribe to On Iowa Politics. For Amie, Tom, Sarah, Jared, and our producer, Stephen, I'm James Lynch. Thanks for listening. Be well.
Today, it's gonna be the greatest, it's gonna be the bestest damn day I ever had. 'Cause today, I climbed the top of a mountain, laid in a hot spring fountain, and laid my fears to rest. But if you wanna go, go home, don't let me stop you. If you wanna tell me something, turn off the lights and close the door. If you wanna go, go home, don't let me stop you. If you wanna tell me something. Well, last night I thought that I was done for, and now I'm laying on the floor, and I found another friend. And tonight I can think of nothing better than laying here together, together till the end. If you wanna go, go home, don't let me stop you. If you wanna tell me something, turn off the lights and close the door. If you wanna go, go home, don't let me stop you. If you wanna tell me something. Right now, I'm feeling kinda anxious about my whole existence and where it's gonna go. 'Cause tomorrow, maybe I'll still be here, but maybe I will disappear, and maybe you will too. But if you wanna go, go home, don't let me stop you. If you wanna tell me something, turn off the lights and close the door. If you wanna go, go home, don't let me stop you. If you wanna tell me something.
Get a daily update from the Gazette with our daily news podcast. Add it to your podcast player or your Alexa-friendly device to get a bite-sized local news update each day. Check it out at thegazette.com/podcasts.